Hey, good morning, church family. So glad you've joined us today for Biltmore Church Online. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. We're so grateful to gather with you today in worship. Wherever you're watching from, whether you're at home, whether you're in the car, on the go, we're glad that you have tuned in, and we're excited to worship with you. And if today is your first time joining us for Church Online, we're so excited that you are here. We've actually got a gift we would love to send to you. Easiest way we can do that is if you take out your phone, text the word welcome to 28282, and we're gonna send that out to you later this week. We're so grateful that you've jumped in with us, and we'd love to connect with you. Whether you've been watching for the first time today or you've been watching for a long time, let me encourage you right now, go ahead and jump into our online chat, whether you're on Facebook, on YouTube, on the website. Jump in and let us know where you're watching from and who you're watching with today. We love interacting with you as we get ready to jump into worship. I want to celebrate together as a church just the amazing generosity that you guys have practiced all year long in 2021. God has done some incredible things because of your faithful giving, not just inside the walls, but outside the walls of our church in Western North Carolina and to the ends of the earth. So thank you for your faithful giving. And I want to let you know today, it's not too late. You can give. If you want to partner with us through your giving, text the word give to 28282, and you can give safely and securely online that way. Now, we're wrapping up our year of the Bible journey that we've been going on as a church today. So we're going to get ready to jump into worship. We're so grateful to gather with you, and let's lean in together as we worship.
Gospel still makes the broken whole. I believe that the curse of sin was broken when they rolled away that stone. I believe, yeah, that as I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. No matter where I go, and no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. Yes, I will. I believe that the walls will start falling when we fall down on our knees, and I believe that the lame will go walking and the blind are gonna see, and I believe that the gates of hell will tremble when the church begins to sing. I believe, yes I believe as I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. And no matter where I go, and no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. Yes, I will. Oh, come on, sing it to the daughters. Oh, and sing it to the sons, to every generation. Yeah, look at what the Lord has done, and sing it to the darkness that the light has come, and sing it to the nations. Yeah, look at what the Lord has done, and sing it to the daughters. Oh, and sing it to the sons, to every generation. Look at what the Lord has done, and sing it to the darkness, yes, that the light has come. Sing it to the nations. Oh, look at what the Lord has done. land I'm living in. And no matter where I go, and no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. And as I bow before you, Lord, I will rise in confidence. I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. And no matter where I go, and no matter where I've been, I will see your goodness, Lord, in the land I'm living in. Yes, I will. Praise you forever. Oh, we praise you, Lord. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of my sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow.
Hey folks, hope you had a fantastic Christmas. Thanks for joining us on this online service on the 26th of December, and hope you're looking forward to a great 2022. All right, and as we look in God's Word today, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 17, and as you go there, one of the things that, if you were watching from the 828, all right, if you're watching from WNC, you know that we love us some mountains. We love our mountains. Mount Mitchell, Grandfather Mountain, Pisgah Mountain, all that we love our mountains, and that's something we look forward to. They look up at, and they're huge. They're permanent. They've been there a long time. All those things. In the Bible, God often uses the mountain as a metaphor of something that is immovable, something that just doesn't seem to change, something that's been there a long, long time. And so that's kind of what I wanted you to get as we go into this next year. What is that thing in your mind? It's that thing that keeps you up. It's that thing that causes you a lot of anxiety. It's that thing that's heaviest on your heart. For some of you, it's maybe marital. You know, it's like, man, my marriage is just not strong and it's getting worse. Maybe it's concerns about a prodigal. Maybe it's financial. Maybe you've got somebody in your family who you love very much, or a friend you love very much. You know, they don't know Christ, and it's like, man, I just so much want them to come to Christ. And it's so whatever that one thing is that you're like, I wish God would do this in 2022. I know what I've got now is not God's best, and I know He's got something better. And I just wish it would happen. I wish it would happen. And maybe it's been there for a long, long time, and it just hadn't seemed to change. And what we're going to talk about today, and what we're going to see in this story, and what I'm praying for us, is that what God did for a man 2,000 years ago, an unnamed man, an unnamed dad, He would also do for you in this year. All right. So here's the context of Matthew 17, which, by the way, Matthew 17 is one of what they call the synoptic gospels. It means that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's parallels. There's a number of stories that are told in Matthew, also told in Mark, also told in Luke, that kind of thing. And so when you bring them together, it's a beautiful tapestry, because you sometimes see different aspects from that. And I'm going to do that in this story. We're going to work through Matthew 17, but just realize in Luke 9 and Mark 9, you see some other aspects that are amazing to kind of get the full picture of this story. So again, the context is this. Peter, James, and John and Jesus are coming down off the mountain. It's called the Mount of Transfiguration. Amazing, amazing deal where you go up on the mountain and they get to see, the glorified Christ. It's just an amazing event. But then they come down to this crowd situation. And let's just start our story in verse 14 of Matthew 17. It says this: "And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, 'Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and he suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water.'" So again, the crowd he's coming up to it's a mixture between the 9 disciples as well as what they call scribes. Scribes are like experts in the law. They knew the Old Testament backwards and forwards, and there's an argument going on, and it revolves around a man who had come with a sick son. Now, again, the man is unnamed in here, but there's a ton of descriptions about this man. Again, just think about it. This is a man. He's got a job. He's got an address. He's a real person. In this case, he's a father. And when you go through all the 3 different stories of this, you see that he's a father and he's got one son. He's got one son. His son is sick. Luke's account says he's had this sickness since childhood, which, go with me for a second on this. Childhood it's a different word than a baby. It's almost like a toddler. And so the idea is that when the son was a baby, he was good for a while. In other words, there were some great days, some good days, some days of, just we have a baby in the house and it's an amazing time and great, parties and pictures and showing Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But then one day, something begins to change. We don't know what it is. The mom maybe looks at the baby and the baby's not doing well, or maybe the color is a little bit different, or something that only a mom can see that's like, the baby's not good. And then it gets progressively worse and progressively worse. And then dad comes home and it's like, this is not good. And just like any dad, like any parent, you can rest assured that he did everything he possibly could do to help his son. I mean, he took him to the best doctors. He If they ran out of money, he probably liquidated stuff to make sure that he could get him the best care. He got his connect group to pray. My son's getting worse and worse and worse. And a matter of fact, what it says is he throws himself into the fire and the water. Now remember contextually where they lived. I mean, you had open fires everywhere. You had, you're right by a sea. So he's around the water all the time. And so I think it's Mark said that it was destroying him. And if you're a parent, there's no pain like kid pain. There's no pain like child pain. So here's a desperate dad. And after a while, you got to understand, he's saying, when is this ever going to change? And when is it going to be different? Is it ever going to be okay? Is God ever going to move in this? And one of the things we've talked about as a church is the hardest time of any difficulty, the hardest time or the hardest part about any trial. It's not the depth of the trial. I mean, if you know, okay, I'm in this trial, but it's going to be over in a week. It's going to be over in a month. It's maybe, but I can see that, the end is going to come at some point. Then it's not nearly as hard as we just say the duration of the trial, how long it's going to last. That's where trials get super difficult. You're like, I don't see how this is ever going to change. How is this situation ever going to improve? And what we tend to do is I was talking with a couple of preacher buddies maybe 2 months ago, and we were talking about this passage and how we go from kind of a threefold phase. The first one we've talked about, and you go from hoping, and hoping is that's like, God's going to move, and your faith is big, and your faith is full, and you pray a lot, and you pray, maybe fervently, and you're just excited, and you're like, I can't wait until God answers this prayer. But if time goes on, if you're not careful, you go to almost what I would say kind of a depression. Let's just call it moping. You go from hoping to moping. You're like, why hadn't God answered? And you can get discouraged. And you see that a lot in the Bible, by the way. You see a lot of times when, one of the most prevalent prayers in the book of Psalm is just called, how long? How long, O Lord, do I have to wait? And you see a lot of those just outpouring of emotion, and you get very, very discouraged about you're not seeing God move. And then kind of the final phase of that, which is where a lot of us go when things don't change after a while, is just coping. Just coping. I don't want to lose my faith. I don't want to maybe question too deeply why this hasn't changed. So we just learn how to cope. We learn how to cope with the fact that God hadn't moved, or we don't see God moving in this situation, and the marriage hadn't improved, and the prodigal hadn't come home, and the business has not gotten better, and the health has not been a better report, and the habit is still right there on your doorstep every single evening, over and over and over and over and over. And so as you look at this, Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Hope deferred, hope put off, hope being pushed away makes it that way. And so for some of you, it might be that season right now, in spite of Christmas being awesome and all these different things, you look at that one area in your life, and the heart has gotten hard, and the tears have gotten dry, and the prayers have gotten stale. And I would just say, loved one, God wants you to come back to hoping today. If you know it's not God's best, he wants you to come back to hoping today, to putting that thing. Biblical hope is the confident expectation that God is at work. I expect God to work. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm expecting him to work. So go back to the story. Look at verse 16 and look what happens. And this is the dad talking, and I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. We'll come back to that. So again, he brought him, we would think, brought him to Jesus, where he thought the disciples were. Jesus up on the mountain. So the remaining disciples tried to heal the boy, and he couldn't. And Jesus answered and said this, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you?" And he says, bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was instantly healed. Now, when you look at Mark's account and Luke's account, you get the full desperation of this dad. Matthew, he says, have mercy on my son. Luke says, I beg you, look at my son. But Mark's account gives us that well-known part where it says, he asked Jesus, if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And think about that. I mean, if you can do anything, Jesus. Now, we don't know how much he knew about Jesus. Maybe he probably heard the talks about, man, we heard about this guy who fed 5,000 people with just a little bit of fish and bread. And we heard about this guy that walked on the water. It's like, I got to get my son there. Everything else has not worked. I'm going to get my son there. And so he says, if you can help us, would you have compassion, empathy on us? And then in an amazing exchange, Jesus actually is like, if I can, because that's what he says. Like, if you can help us, he's like, if you can. And that's when Jesus says, all things are possible for you who believe. All things are possible for you who believe. And listen, here's the classic statement by the dad. The dad cries out and says, I do believe, help my unbelief. And that's where you can get. I do believe, I believe you're good, God. I believe you're alive. I believe you came up out of that grave. But help my unbelief in this area. Help me believe that you can restore my marriage. Help me believe you can bring the prodigal home. Help me believe you can bring me back to health. Help me believe you can reconcile this relationship. Help me believe you can help me have victory over this destructive habit. He says, help me believe because I can't believe right now. So let's talk about that for just a minute before we close. The word he uses there about faith, because you see faith throughout the story, you see faith throughout the Bible. It's the word pisteuo, all right, which means to trust in or believe in. And you see in the Bible, you see kind of some big pictures and you see some smaller pictures. The main truth of the Bible, if you want to put it in the big picture, the main truth of the Bible is the glory of God. I mean, that's the truth of the Bible. The Bible is it's not about you. It's for you, but it's not about you, all right? And the same way, God is for you, all right? You don't die for somebody you're not for. But the whole world revolves around God. It doesn't revolve around us. Think about it. We were made by God. We were made for God. That's why when we understand that, everything starts to fall into place. One theologian put it this way. He says, God is most glorified when we are most satisfied in him. Colossians chapter 1 says, everything is made by him and for him and moving toward him. And so that's the overarching, really, theme of the Bible is the glory of God. Now, when you talk about the main, I guess what's the story of the Bible? It's the redemptive work of Jesus. All right, that God is glorified most in the redemptive work of Jesus. As a church, we just finished a year in the Bible. And so what we saw that every story is really about one story. Every character is really talking about one character. All right, it's about the story of God. It's about the redemptive story of Jesus coming and rescuing his people. From Genesis chapter 3 all the way to Revelation chapter 22, it's all about Jesus. But if you take the overarching view of the Bible, the glory of God, and the story of the Bible, the redemptive work of Jesus, the vehicle in which we lay hold of all the things God has for us is faith. It is faith. Over and over again, it's faith. Faith is the confidence in the power and the provision of Jesus. It's an internal conviction that leads to some outward action. And I want to say this in a precise way. As a Bible church, here's what we've got to be careful of. Don't let the faith teachers, the faith teachers and the unbiblical prosperity theology steal from you a biblical faith, a robust faith, the power of what faith is. All right, not faith in faith, but faith in Jesus, because he says, listen, I do believe, help my unbelief. Because look what happens, last couple of verses, verse 19 and 20. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately, and it's like, hey, let's have a little classroom session here. Why could we not cast it out? Then he said to them, because of your little faith. There it is again. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of a mustard seed, which is like super small, you will say to this mountain, and here's our theme, you'll say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it says, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. So if you're jotting down notes, there's three types of faith you see in this story real quickly. The first type of faith is really in the scribes. Let's just call that a dead faith. That's orthodoxy with no realism. All right, they knew the Old Testament really well. They had much of the Old Testament memorized. But amazingly, these teachers of the law, these scribes, they knew this whole book. They knew all the promises about the coming king. They knew Isaiah 53 about the suffering servant, but they got 10 feet from him and they didn't understand it. They read and memorized the promises and then they missed the person. And so one of the things that is always a fear is that a person can be religious without having a relationship with God, that has never repented. And if that's you, then make sure that you're not, religion is how do we make our way back up to God? But the gospel is about that that's what we just celebrate. God became a man, dwelt among us, then lived the life we should have lived, died the death we deserve to die. And so the gospel takes root when that first step of faith is repentance and belief to say, you know what, I surrender my life to Christ. I believe that what you did on that cross counted for me. That's the first step of faith, all right? You got to do that before these other ones. So dead faith is one. But even after that, you see a second one, and we're just going to call it deficient faith. It says that the disciples at this point, they had little faith. They're like, why couldn't we move mountains? Why couldn't we get this done? Why couldn't we heal this poor? Why couldn't we do that? And he says, because of your little faith. Now, deficient faith is better than dead faith. And so you've probably shown some faith in whatever that area is. You've probably thrown up a few prayers for your marriage. You probably maybe got some accountability for that destructive habit. You might have, gone to a financial peace university. You've taken a little bit of a step of faith, but it says there's deficient faith. And what happens is there's still a lot of defeat. There's still a lot of anxiety. There's not the victory that God has for me. And so what you see with the dad is what we're just going to call desperate faith. You can call it dependent faith if you want to, but desperate faith. He says it's faith like a mustard seed. It's super small, but it's desperate enough to do two things that you see in the story. Because this is the dad. The dad took tiny faith, brought it to Jesus. Mark's account actually says this doesn't ever happen except by prayer. So what you see is somehow, some way, desperate faith is tied into being expressed by desperate prayer. And so two things about this. Mountain moving faith, number one, does require you to take some action. When the dad took some action in here, the dad didn't just sit at home and say, I got faith. All right, he actually took some action. A bunch of verbs in this passage. He came, he brought the boy to Jesus, he knelt before Jesus, he cried out to Jesus. So what is it that God has told you to do about that situation? Part of faith is actually doing what God says, not just sitting back and expecting him to bring the miracle, but you might be a part of the miracle. Maybe you got to make that phone call. Maybe you've got to make that apology, all right? Maybe you've got to get in that community, whatever that is, but faith takes some action. But for sure, this kind of faith, desperate faith, it means you got to cry out to God for help. Now, I know you've prayed. If you got a situation, almost everybody has cried out to God or prayed to God about, in their desperation, whether it be health or relational or whatever, they've cried out to God some. But what you see here is he's actually just praying. He's praying for the circumstance and he's praying for himself. He's like, I do believe, but help my unbelief. And that might be where you are. How do I reverse that trend? I'm just coping. I'm just making it through, but how do I go back to hoping again? And so what you see is what I'm going to ask you to do is right where you are. I don't know where you're watching from. Maybe you're watching by yourself. Maybe you're watching with your family. Wherever you're watching, is think about that. What is that one area? What's that one area that you're like, God, please move in this area. Please move in this area. And again, maybe the tears have dried up. Maybe it's been a while. I've shared this story several times with my church. And the one that comes to mind, the shortened version of it is, I came to Christ as a late teenager. My mom, amazing woman, but wasn't a follower of Jesus. And so for 20 years or so, we just prayed and prayed. But then after about 20 years, you got kind of tired of praying. And so I went from praying all the time with tears, and then I prayed most of the time, and then I prayed some of the time. And again, long story short, we were praying, but there just didn't see much movement. And a great example for me was I actually got to go up and talk with Mr. Graham before he passed away. And as we were talking, and he ended up praying for my mom. And he prayed one of the most desperate, theologically accurate, passionate prayers for another person to come to Christ that I had ever heard. And I remember driving down the mountain out there in Montreat and just telling, calling my brothers, like, man, mom's got no chance, man. Billy Graham just prayed for her. And I would say this, 6 months later, my mom got saved. And so what that always reminds me of is I had grown weary in praying. I had grown weary in crying out to God. And it took the example of another person just like, that's how you pray. That's how you cry out to God. And so I would encourage you to cry out to God. Again, wherever you are, whatever your situation is, it could be everything. It could be, it could be relational. It could be just the fact that there's a lot of shame that you've got. You're like, man, I just don't think, you can't believe that God would wipe your slate clean. You can't believe he would put righteousness on you. Whatever that situation is, just right now, say, God, bring your power to bear in this situation, that place where you have ceased to hope. Just say, I want to believe that you will do for me in 2022 what you did for that man 2,000 years ago. All right, so why don't you bow your heads, and I want to pray for you, but get that one thing, all right? Get that one thing. I'm going to pray for you, and then we'll be done, okay? All right. Father, I want to just pray. Thank you for the folks that are watching today. And your word is full of promises. You said the eyes of the Lord move to and fro to strongly support those whose hearts are completely yours. And God, I want to pray for that marriage that is about to break up, that husband that wants to walk out the door. God, help them to just cry out to you once again. And God, you said it's not your will that man should separate from his wife. You put them together. So bring them back. Give them a great dose of humility and gospel infusion into their home. God, I pray for that parent that is so weary of crying out for their prodigal. God, I just pray you'd bring the sons and daughters from afar. God, I want to pray for that person that walks in shame and is having a hard time believing that you could actually clothe them with righteousness. God, that you would bring them to mind over and over. Romans 8, chapter 1, there's no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus. That you would bring to mind again that, as their sins are as scarlet, you can make them as white as snow. And God, I pray as the year begins here in just a couple of days, we'll be people on our face, on our knees, crying out to God. God, you do what only you can do. And so we do believe in our prayers, you would help our unbelief. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks so much for joining us today for our online service. We hope today's message was both encouraging and challenging for you. Now, as we go into this new year, we're excited to see all of the things that the Lord is going to do. We're excited to see God's faithfulness and His goodness all throughout 2022. Now, in January, as a church, we're starting a new sermon series out of Song of Solomon. We hope that you'll join us. And as always, you are loved and you are sent. Check out this video.